Our first presentation will be given by Ray Major. Ray Major currently is the Chief Data and Analytics Officer responsible for leading SANDAG's data analytics strategy, driving empirically based solutions and transforming the agency into an analytics-driven organization. Ray is responsible for the agency's open data, big data, and data science initiatives. As the chief economist for the San Diego region, responsibilities include developing and translating economic and transportation data and trends into accurate and relevant insights. Dedicated to using data visualization and analysis to help inform decision makers. Responsible for the region's economic prosperity strategy and for its short and long-term economic forecasts. Ray is Director of Data, Analytics, and Modeling, responsible for all the agency's big data, data science, and core data products, including primary data collection, short and long-range economic forecasts, demographic forecasts, and transportation network modeling. Departments managed include database administration, data development, including GIS and transportation network data, economic and demographic modeling, transportation, criminal justice research unit, software development, quality assurance, and project product management functions. Ray also serves on boards for the San Diego North Economic Development Council and HDSI Industry Fellow, and also serves on the board of directors with South San Diego East County EDC. So it's my pleasure to introduce Ray Major as our presentation for this month. Ray?
Well, thank you very much for that introduction, and I'm very honored to be part of your board also. This is my first meeting with you. And I was asked to do this presentation by Jim, and I'm going to be doing a quick economic update on some of the indicators that we're following. And I hope that in the coming months, I'll have another opportunity to give you data that's more specific to South County, but that requires us to do additional analysis and data pulling. So with that, I'm going to share my screen, and hopefully I can get this PowerPoint presentation up. So I'm assuming you can see it. If you can't, then let me know.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So some of the things that I wanted to talk about really are the things that have been the most active in our economy over the last year or so, probably since this COVID started. And one of them is really housing. And these are the county housing prices. And I think everybody knows that we are having absolute increases in housing prices. This is the existing single family detached home prices. And you can see that since the Great Recession, housing prices have been increasing in San Diego, but it has been just absolutely crazy in 2021. There's a lot of demand for housing. We have a short supply of housing. And mortgage interest rates remain low, which means there are a lot of people out there who are looking for houses, but there's a lot of pent up demand here.
Excuse me, but we can't see other than the first the title page. I can't not see the
you can't? Okay, so
you have to scroll down. You must just have to scroll down. Go ahead. If you scroll down, I'll be able to see it, or I think everybody's gonna be able to see
okay,
it.
hold on just a second.
No, just the arrow button. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I'll do it this way. Okay, fine. It's on a different screen, so we'll do it this way. Okay. So affordability, San Diego regional housing affordability. When we take a look at affordability, this is people's ability to purchase houses. And hold on just a second. Can't get over there. So anyway, people's abilities to purchase houses. At the beginning of the Great Recession, you saw that we had about 9% of the people who would have been able to repurchase their own house. Now it's about 22%. And you can see that this is continuing to fall as housing prices go up. The interesting thing here is that housing prices are actually higher now than they were before the Great Recession. And the reason that housing affordability is still kind of is higher has everything to do with mortgage interest rates and the fact that we have low interest rates. Back before the Great Recession, we had interest rates that were around 6.5%, and really that's the difference between the two, is what you can afford. Right now, if you take a look at the median price home of about $840,000, you need a qualifying income of about $153,000 to be able to purchase that if you put a 20% down payment down. But the median income in San Diego is about $84,000, which would allow you to buy a $460,000 house. And so you can imagine that there are not a lot of people who have who earn the median income who could purchase a house by themselves, because there are not a lot of housing out there that's $460,000. Okay. When we take a look at residential permits issued, this gives us an idea of how many housing units were built over the different decades. And what you'll see is that there are these peaks in the 70s and 80s. And if you look at this graph, it tells you where the areas that were being built out. And you see that Eastlake, for instance, was being built out in the 2000s. And this is really how we supplied the housing in the past for our communities. So we would build 30, 40,000 houses per year, and then there would be a tremendous amount of supply. And then all of a sudden the developers would stop building, we might go into a recession, that housing was absorbed into the economy, and we'd start that cycle again. But if you take a look at what's happened since 2000, you'll see that we have not been able to keep up with demand. So just looking at natural growth, we need about 12,000 housing units per year to keep up with that. And you see that since the 2000s, so it's been over 20 years now, we have not been able to build enough housing units. Even with a booming economy, as we came out of the Great Recession, we were a little sluggish, but we never did recover to where we were building enough units. So what's happened here is that this has created a shortage. And right now we have a backlog of about 63,000 units. If you take into account the fact that many units now are also being reserved for Airbnb purposes, VBRO purposes, and then you also have a lot of places like Coronado, for instance, that have relatively high vacancy rates because a lot of those homes are second homes. So they're really not available for San Diego residents. So if you take all that into account, you're looking at about 100,000 units that we're short here in the region, and that's part of what's forcing the price up. So if you take a look at the housing market, this graph shows the median home price and existing sales, and you'll see that the housing prices since COVID, that you see a little dip there, where you about 4 or 5 bars back. That was when COVID first hit. Nobody could really go out and look at houses, but then the real estate market kind of was able to adjust to that. We figured out how to look at houses again, and you see that prices have increased, as have in existing home sales. So the market still remains strong. When we take a look at unemployment, we try to do this unemployment report by zip code to try to understand which areas have been affected the most. And you'll see that the South Bay area within San Diego is still the most affected in terms of unemployment. And so some of the areas are doing a little bit better, especially up in the Sereno Valley North area. And the reason for that is that more of those jobs are telecommutable. What we found when we were doing our analytics is that many of the jobs that are held by the people who are in South County are in those sectors of the economy that were the hardest hit. And so they're also having the hardest time recovering. This graph shows the labor force participation rate and unemployment, and this goes back to 2019, so this is about pre-COVID. And you see that we had about 3% unemployment, which from an economist perspective is considered to be full employment. You see that labor force has fallen a little bit, which means some people have dropped out of the workforce, but our unemployment is still more than twice what we had before. Now, a lot of this has to do with some industries not fully recovering. Some of it has to do with people who are needing to take care of family or children, for instance, and they're unable to work. And there are some people also who are not needing to because of the stimulus checks that they have been receiving. And so with that, we have a lot of people who are still unemployed, but we also have a tremendous number of jobs out there, or businesses that are looking for jobs. This shows how we've recovered from unemployment over the last couple of recessions. And what you see is this COVID recession was completely different than the previous two recessions, where we would lose employment by maybe 10%. That would be a big drop in employment in San Diego. And then you saw that it would take about 4 years for us to recover. Well, we lost a tremendous amount of employment right out of the chute. And you see that we recovered. We're still, in July, we're 8% below. We're about 6.7% below right now. The recovery is slower than we had hoped. And that just has to do with this Delta variant and businesses just not being able to fully open up the way that we had anticipated. Now, this is an interesting graph because this shows employment by income group. And if you take a look at where the big dip is, whether you are making above the median income, below the median income, or the average, which is the middle green line, everybody took a hit in terms of employment when COVID hit. But you can see that there was a relatively quick recovery of those people who were above the US median wage. And I know these wages seem low for San Diego, but these are the only data that we have right now, which is US data. But what you see is that green line at the top is nearly at 100%. And in fact, some industries have recovered and actually grown. Where we see the unemployment really is in the low income groups. So people who are earning minimum wage, or in this particular case, below about $17 or $18 an hour, where we still have about a 20% unemployment rate in that income category. When we look at the hardest hit sectors, it was tourism, education, and professional services here in the San Diego region. We're still down by about 122,000 jobs. 89,000 of those, or 73%, are in these three sectors. And as I talked about, there are a lot of people in the South Bay who work in the tourism industry and also in retail, and that's why you're seeing higher unemployment rates in the South Bay. But there are some interesting trends in spending. When we take a look at spending, this is through the COVID period. You see that people started to spend more money on durable goods and non-durable goods. So that was where you pick up a lot of the Amazon shopping. So people were buying things, and they were also paying more money for their housing and utilities. But where they were saving or not spending as much was on healthcare. They were not going to doctor's appointments, travel and accommodations, food services, which is the restaurant industry, Uber and Lyft, transportation services, airlines are in that category also. And so what you see is that spending shifted, which is interesting because on the left-hand side, what you have are those items that are taxable, and more on the right-hand side, they're not taxable. So from a taxation perspective, the region has done relatively well in terms of sales tax revenue. This graph shows what's happened, though, in the last quarter. And what you see is that every sector has spending up. And so this is kind of as we've reopened the economy, people are starting to go back to work, people are starting to use services more, going on vacation a little bit more, but we still see a tremendous amount of spending on durable and non-durable goods. And this is in part what would be driving inflation. When we take a look at spending from January through July, January 20 through July, you see again with the COVID, spending was down as much as 40% as we went into a recession or into the COVID lockdown. We recovered that, and as you can see in the last couple of months, spending is actually up. So this is a sign of a strong economy. A lot of this has to do with the stimulus dollars that have been put into the economy. And so people have more money to spend, and it's showing up in our sales here, in our spending in the region. So spending behavior has also changed during COVID, which is really interesting to kind of track what's happened. When you look at food services versus restaurants, food services is the darker blue line on the top. and then you have food services and drinking places or restaurants are the lighter blue, and then food and beverage stores are the darker blue line. And so you see that during COVID, people started to buy more food, but that quickly reversed as restaurants opened up. And you can see that restaurants, if you look at if you kind of do a trend line there, you see that they're kind of back to where they should be. And I think that's pretty much evidenced by just going out to the restaurants and seeing that they really are full. Online spending and brick and mortar have changed also. Online spending, excuse me, significantly increased during COVID, and it's remained high. Brick and mortar has recovered, which is great for brick and mortar. I think there are a lot of stores though that are still going to be struggling because this trend is not going to change. And you're going to see more people moving to online for a lot of their purchases. And inflation is up, and this is near the end of my presentation here, just from a timing perspective. But what we see is that inflation has significantly started to increase, and energy prices are up, as are used car and truck prices. And the reason that car prices are up has a lot to do with supply chain issues that are happening. But when you take a look at inflation from a everyday perspective, I think everyone is feeling it. If you've gone to a grocery store and you've tried to purchase meat products or anything, if you go to a drive-through restaurant, for instance, it's going to cost you $10 for a meal, for instance. So we see a lot of inflation that's happening in things that are typical consumer goods. And so hopefully this trend stops. I think we're going to see a little bit more of this, at least for the next year, as we have the stimulus money move through the economy. And again, these are just two other slides that are showing core inflation and what's happening. You see that inflation is going up. It's about 4 or 5% right now, and energy and used cars are the two big categories that are driving that. And so with that, I will turn it over to you guys for any questions that you might have, and I will stop sharing my slide.
Thank you, Ray. We appreciate that information. Very interesting